Serious, what historical event from way back is just plain bizarre to you? Rasputin's whole life. The idea that this scraggly wizard priest, maybe not even a real priest, was able to influence the Russian royal family is just so wild to me. The only interesting thing is that he had a way of helping with Alexei's hemophilia, although it may have been something as simple as stopping them from giving him aspirin. The Presidency of Chester A. Arthur. This was a man neck deep in the political corruption machine back in the day. Every step of his career was built on the spoils system of the time, including how he became vice president. He enjoyed it too, building fabulous wealth during his time at the New York Custom House and giving favors to his associates as vice president. You would think that this man would only continue this as president, but no. In his very first address to Congress, he specifically requested civil service reform. He wanted to dismantle the very machine that got him his wealth and power. He was perfectly happy doing favors as a VP and being the recipient of other favors. But the second he became the big man, he wanted to change the whole system for the better. In a little under 2 years after Garfield's assassination, Arthur signed the reform bill that mandates government positions are awarded based on merit. My history teacher loved to go on these little asides. He was convinced President Arthur had brain tumor or a stroke because there was such a change in his outlook. He had no evidence of this, of course, but Arthur did a 180 on lots of things from native treatments to corruption. The Lost Army of Cambyses. Around 524 BCE, the Persian king Cambyses II sent an army of 50,000 men out into the African desert to subdue a rebellious outpost resisting the king's conquest of Egypt and surrounding areas. The army supposedly encountered a massive dust storm, which completely engulfed them and covered them with fatal dunes of sand. They were never heard from and never found. In modern times, some archaeologists have claimed to find remains, but their claims are not universally accepted by their peers. Wojtek the Bear. He was a bear taken in by the Wojska Polish army in World War II, and he helped move ammunition. His favorite thing to drink was beer, and he was taught to salute when greeted. He was enlisted into the Polish army as a basic private so that they could keep him, had his own paybook and everything, lived out his retirement in Edinburgh Zoo and died sometime in the late 1950s, and as of 2015 there is a statue of him in Edinburgh's Princes Street Gardens. Even though he was living in the zoo, I can't seem to find many post-war photos of him. One of the weirdest historical events was the dancing mania that happened in Europe between the 14th and 17th centuries. People suddenly started to dance and couldn't stop. It could be up to 1,000 people just dancing and not stopping. They danced until they got exhausted and just collapsed. No one is sure why this happened. Heard about that? There's a theory that it was caused by ergot, a fungus that grows on grains and causes severe hallucinations and mania if I recall correctly. Rape of Nanking. How can you rape a baby, even if it is your enemy's baby? All humanity must be lost for you to insert your dong into a human baby. That is what confuses me about the torture style of this event. There's a book by that name. It's really good. It doesn't try to explain why but offers a few possible reasons. The soldiers also made the men rape their own sisters and mothers. It was just pure rape, murder, torture, and misery for those people. The punishment surrounding being accused of witchcraft or magic. I mean, self-preservation tells me if they can do magic for realsies and I try to burn them, I'm very much the one gonna be on fire or turned into a sentient butt plug and lodged in a goat's butt for eternity. Turned into a sentient butt plug. Deus Vult. L. Ron Hubbard, the creator of Scientology, was big into black magic and used to hang out with Aleister Crowley and his whole crew. He had a weird battle of egos with Jack Parsons, a rocket scientist, and they all performed the Moonchild ritual to summon the Antichrist, and the details of the ritual came to pass. After performing the ritual, a Scarlet Woman was supposed to appear and give birth to the Antichrist. The next day a random red-headed woman showed up at their place insisting she be involved in their magical sexual escapades. Coincidence or not that she was there, they knocked her up, thus fulfilling the requirements of the ritual. Then Hubbard, Parsons and his wife banded together to flip yachts for a profit. Hubbard stole the investment money and Parsons' wife and disappeared to start Scientology later on. Michelangelo, the man's whole life was him being a badass. He was literally like an Italian cowboy with the profound ability to create mesmerizing sculptures. In the 19th century, a British man named Joshua Norton came to Los Angeles, San Francisco and proclaimed himself Norton I, Emperor of the United States, Protector of Mexico, the latter title being in response to the French invasion of Mexico. His rule lasted from 1859 to 1881. As emperor, some of Norton's accomplishments included but weren't limited to getting spurned by Queen Victoria, being recognized as the only legitimate leader of the United States by King Kamehameha V of Hawaii, declaring both Republican and Democratic parties dissolved, having tea with Emperor Pedro II of Brazil. The bizarre part isn't that he existed, the bizarre part was that he was basically the 19th century parallel to sexy vegan, and that clearly he was doing much more than any president we've had between Lincoln and TR. The best part is that everyone in town just kind of ran with it. It's not a single event, but it's amazing to me how much trouble people used to have crossing the English Channel. Starting with William the Conqueror and effectively ending with John, English kings held lands in both England and France. But even for royalty, it was difficult and risky to cross the channel. And when they did cross, they were never quite sure where on the coast they'd land. The one time a pope dug up another pope to put his corpse on trial. This is called the Cadaver Synod, which I must mention because it is objectively the most metal band name possible. The live pope yelled at the dead pope's body for a while, and then the trial concluded with a guilty verdict, which one would expect. The types of trials that are fair and legitimate and give the accused a chance to defend themselves are, by and large, not anywhere close to the types of trials where one of the parties has been dead for a few years. The live pope had the dead pope's blessing hand cut off, had his papacy annulled, meaning he was unpoped, and was buried in a pauper's grave. Of course, putting your dead rival's corpse on trial is not the thing done by someone with restraint or a sense of moderation. So naturally he dug up the old pope again, who this time was not a pope anymore, put him on trial again, declared him guilty again, and threw his body in a river. The living pope was eventually deposed, arrested, and strangled to death in a jail cell, in part due to rumors that the dead pope's body had washed up on shore and started performing miracles, meaning that he's not just a dead unpope, but in fact an undead pope. There was some instability in the church over the following years, and various factions allied with and against the corpse prosecuting pope successively attained the papacy. The prosecuting pope had several of his acts rolled back and then reinstated. The firstly dead not pope had his papacy restored, then the restoration was annulled, or the original annulment was reinstated, and then re-restored, or the annulment was annulled, and during this time his body was exhumed and buried at least 2 more times. Accounts differ on whether there was another trial. The Catholic Church now has a rule prohibiting putting corpses on trial. This is what you get when you have a Charlie Chaplin for a pope and everyone in his court is a Charlie Chaplin. Dmitri, the Tsar of Russia, was killed, mysteriously reappeared, killed, mysteriously reappeared, killed, then mysteriously reappeared, then killed, then reappeared, then killed before they finally decided that he was really dead and no one after that could possibly be Dmitri. I might be exaggerating a little, but only by one death and reappearance. Not really bizarre but more amazing was the siege of Vicksburg by Grant during the Civil War. The fortifications on the Mississippi River were dang impressive, but they didn't take into account that if you got close to the river's edge, the gun's angle couldn't reach that far down. So by hugging the river's edge closest to Vicksburg, Grant essentially had a free shot at the city and allowed him to take out the last heavily fortified city on the Mississippi. The siege lasted like a month. The siege lasted 47 days and ended when the city surrendered on the 4th of July, 1863. Independence Day celebrations were not held in the city for decades afterwards. A man named Diego Maradona scored a goal using his hand. Even though that's an illegal move on football, it was counted, and his reputation around the world escalated immensely after that move, which would be called the hand of God. I mean, rest in peace Diego, but come on, that was illegal. I don't know why I laughed at that last sentence. I just imagine some P-off fan who just never got over that play saying yeah, he was a great guy and a great player, but let's be real for a second. He cheated us bad. The Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated almost by accident. His killer had missed him earlier. Then, when the Archduke's car made a wrong turn, the assassin was sitting in a cafe when he happened to come down the street. Unfortunate history unfolded. And boom. There goes World War I. The rampant child abuse is pretty shocking. Dan Carlin has a podcast that talks about it. Basically, if you accept what we know now about child abuse and how it affects people as adults, it really explains a lot of the whack crap that has happened throughout history. Child abuse. You're abusing your kid. No, I'm disciplining my kid. Oh, I'm sorry. Carry on, then. My husband and I were just talking about the whole Riveter Rosie, we can do it mentality, and then backslid once the men came back into the bulls about women not doing things besides in the house. It's stunning the work women were encouraged to do in heavy industry during World War II, only to be shamed into not doing it the next decade. In both instances, though, a woman's purpose was to support men, at home or abroad. I thought that the petticoat wars were bizarre when I learned about them in high school, but now I know that some politicians are just children with a lot of power. So of course a president fired most of his cabinet because their wives wouldn't sit with someone else's wife. All humans are just children who like to pretend otherwise. The Dorado Myth was started by captives to lead conquistadors on wild goose chases, and it worked at least 5 times. The Bal des Ardents, or the Bull of the Burning Men man. Charles VI of France, 1368 to 1422, and some of his friends crashed the 3rd wedding of his wife's lady-in-waiting by wearing suits made of tar-soaked linen and strands of dried hemp. Unfortunately, Charles's own brother, drunk as ever, brought a torch into the ceremony, which had been forbidden. One of the men went up in flames before it spread to almost every single one of them, apart from Charles. Charles, seeing his friends go up in flames, hid underneath his 15-year-old aunt, Joan II, Countess of Auvergne's dress. 4 of the other 5 dancers died, save one who managed to jump into a barrel of wine in time to save himself from being too badly burned. Got a couple. James Strang. After Joseph Smith was killed, most of his second-in-command followers were fighting about which one of them would be the new Mormon leader. During all this chaos in walks this nobody named Strang, who claims to have found another set of hidden plates and a forged letter from Smith saying he is the new leader. He ended up taking about a third of the Mormons up to Michigan, where he declared himself king of Beaver Island. He ended up getting shot by his own followers because he was nuts. William Walker. Ever think it would be cool to have your own country? So did Walker, only he actually tried to do it with some success. He first tried to invade Mexico. That did not pan out though. Then he tried Nicaragua, where he became president for a little over a year before the neighboring states kicked him out. He tried one more time to take over Honduras, but they caught him and killed him because it was pretty clear he was never going to stop. Baron Ungern Sternberg. You know how the Mongolian Empire was pretty badass? Well, Sternberg attempted to bring it back. He was a general White Russian army during the Russian Civil War, but decided that he wanted to take his army to Mongolia. Once there he teamed up with some local tribes and the Buddhist leader and chased the communists out. Him and his ragtag group held out for a decent amount of time before being put down. The AIDS epidemic used to really seem strange to me. They just let so many people die because they didn't want to do anything about it because it mostly affected gay men. I used to think, how could anyone just let something like that kill so many people and not care about? But I've learned, especially now, that people are buttholes. It wasn't malicious. During the epidemic, no one had any idea of how to treat it, or even understood what was happening to people, at first. For years it was considered incurable and fatal. I'm still blown away that it became no big deal to treat it later. Huge medical breakthrough. The amount of incest. You would think they would have noticed things were off with the practice a lot sooner than they did. Oh, easily the War of the Bucket. This was between Bologna and Modena. It was over a wooden bucket that was stolen from one of the city. Hitler attacking the USSR just made no sense at that part of the war. In line with that, even though Japan figured the US would get involved in the war at some point, the attack on Pearl Harbor was insanity. I think both point out how little countries knew about each other's intentions back then. It was even worse in the build-up to WW1, as Tuckman brilliantly points in The Guns of August. The whole concept of colonization. Let's show up in a foreign country, plant a flag, and announce that we're in charge now and all your lands belong to us. I'm homeschooling this year, explaining world history to my 9yo and it feels like colonization is all we talk about. She thought it was particularly funny that Columbus died believing he was in India the whole time and then, just for funsies, we kept calling the natives Indians for centuries after finding out they weren't anything of the sort. A Swedish king killed himself by eating too much pudding and a French noble had to be removed from his own court because he couldn't stop masturbating for more than a half hour. To add to this, one time the Swedish asked Napoleon for a new king, and he sent them a marshal he disagreed with. To this day they still have that royal family because the marshal went on to side against Napoleon. 16th century royals just crapping and pee all over their castles, then going to stay at someone else's castle while theirs was cleaned and fumigated. China's Great Famine. Completely mind-blowing. Tens of millions of people suffer from famine and die at the hands of the government and people still find it taboo or unthinkable to talk about. As an American kid, the reaction to Princess Diana's death, especially when I read the suicide rate in women her age increased after her death, that crap is just bizarre to me. Not just one historical fact but the abundance of genocides in the 20th century and our inability as a species to learn from them and prevent them. The dancing plague in France in 1518. It began with one woman breaking out in dance in the town square. Records vary, with some saying 50, others up to 300 people danced until they died, like they couldn't or wouldn't stop dancing and died of exhaustion and dehydration. Doctors and priests could find no explanation for it. It only stopped when the people were forcibly taken to a hospital and restrained. That the kiss we now do at the end of the wedding ceremony comes from people long ago having to consummate, do the horizontal tango, their marriages in front of family and friends. If you did not do it with witnesses, then your marriage was deemed illegitimate. While royals were often required to have witnesses to consummation, they weren't just dropping trow in the church. Unit 731. Japanese human experimentation on Chinese and Allied civilians and POWs. Joseph Mengele, Nazi doctor obsessed with twins and dwarfs, even sewing people together attempting to create conjoined twins, was never caught. Died swimming off the coast of Argentina in the 80s. The Jonestown mass suicide. Jim Jones, American cult leader who took his church to Guyana to avoid scrutiny from the US government and followers' families. When the web closed in around him, he had his followers commit mass suicide by drinking poisoned Kool-Aid. Some not wanting to were forced at gunpoint. He then killed himself. The Opium Wars. Great Britain invaded China because they didn't want to buy our opium, which is what H is made from. So we invaded and were given certain port cities like Hong Kong, which we owned until the 90s. Loads of mad pieces of history, but these are the ones that came to mind. Flavor Aid, not Kool-Aid. How an entire southern part of the US tried to secede, failed, are still part of the Union and still think they won somehow. Spartan schools encourage stealing, but only if you didn't get caught. How'd they know to give good grades in stealing class? Sherman's March to the Sea. When General Sherman decided that the way to win the Civil War was to break the back of the South's supply lines by burning every farm and factory they came across between the Mason-Dixon line and the Gulf of Mexico, this was a little scorched earth campaign. Honestly, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, simply because it didn't come across as a tragedy, but just this Three Stooges skit where the entire planet stumbles dong first into annihilation. The Mongols being able to create the largest empire by landmass encompassing most of Asia and the Middle East. Also, the shortest lasting empire. The sheer logistics, strategy, and physicality of the Mongols to do this in 2 generations is busily terrifying. The huge dust storms in North or South Dakota, I don't remember, but if you didn't have a mask you would suffocate from crazy amount of dust in your lungs. Oh yeah, and I also read a book on a molasses flood in Boston. Many people drowned in the molasses and it's told that you can still smell molasses on the ground. Not even an event, but just, you talk to women from the greatest silent generations about how they met their husbands, and it seems like it's almost always a variation of, well, I kept turning him down, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. HR departments hadn't been invented yet, so after a few weeks of this I finally gave in and agreed to go on a date with him. Long story short, we have 5 children and a platoon of grandkids. The Pearl Harbor attack was absolutely delusional. Oh, we'll just blow up their Pacific fleet, and then we'll win. Should have checked the resources available to the USA before signing off on that idea. Tojo-san. I really used to doubt that Stalin really existed. That was probably shortly after reading 1984. Nevertheless, I simply couldn't believe that someone with so much power could have ruled an actual 20th century progressive world power and keep every mouth shut with a grip so tight that many leftists in the West actually saw him as a hero, and it took 3 years of time for the Soviet communists to come to a conclusion that the Stalinist era was actually kinda in the wrong and that they shouldn't maybe depend on an authority so much. I got a chance to visit the Stalin Museum in his hometown in Gore, Georgia. Absolutely fascinating. So here's a bit of trivia. Stalin's one arm was shorter than the other, and that was a point of insecurity for him. So in most photos, you'll see one hand in a pocket to avoid comparing arm lengths. A lot of oral history talks about a great flood. Scientists have said this would have been roughly 14k years ago, and yet multiple native cultures have remembered this via just talking. I'm really intrigued by whatever went on with Jeff the Mongoose. Was he a hoax? A shared hallucination? Something paranormal? Most of the evidence points to him being a hoax, but there were just so many details. If he was a hoax, the family sure put a heck of a lot of effort into it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.